just going up and down scales endlessly isn't the only way that we can practice them. Obviously, that's important to do, but there's other things that we can sometimes do as well to practice actually using them. We're going to do something that I think is one of the most useful skills I've practiced over the years. It's really helped my musicianship, helped me to find things I want at the piano. I'm talking about taking something from one key and putting it into another key, which we can call transposing. Now in this video, we're going to do it with a melody. So I can play that using different notes, but it just sounds like the same thing shifted. And we can do that with anything, any melody. We can start from any note, any pattern, any chord progression, any entire piece of music. And you can follow along with the video and try and figure out how to play this in a few different keys. Don't worry if that sounds hard. We're not going to do anything too complicated in this video, and I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. Okay, so why is this a helpful thing to do? Why should you practice playing things in different keys, the same thing using another scale? If you want to learn to play piano in a certain kind of style, play patterns or melodies that have a certain sound to them, types of riffs or licks from some kind of style of music, types of chord progressions, that kind of thing, then you have to be able to do that in more than just one key, so you can apply it in different situations. It helps us just get even more familiar with using scales in this case, locking inside them without going off course and getting mixed up with notes that aren't in it. We're trying to get a real awareness of how the notes we're using relate to the key, where and how they move around that scale that you're using. So each time we do this, the notes will be different, but it will move around in the same positions inside that new scale. And you use this kind of thinking when you're doing things like writing music, improvising, or working things out by ear. Right, so the example we're going to use is a part of the melody of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and we're going to learn it in the key of C major first. Now, this is not a technical exercise, so if the rhythm and things are a little bit iffy, don't worry too much. That's not the purpose of what we're doing. We're not trying to play it perfectly. Here's the first half of what we're doing. I'm going to break down that melody a bit, and then we're going to kind of use that information to help us take it to another key. So essentially, we're just trying to think about where in our scale those notes are happening, so we can put them in the same place in the new key. Now, a way to make that nice and clear is to just number the notes in the scale. The melody is in a major key using a major scale, and we're in the key of C to start with. So C is 1. And then it's literally just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're going to say back to 1 again. So we're going to start on the first note of the scale. So that would be C in this case. If we were in the key of F, we'd be starting on an F. So the melody goes from the first note of the scale, and it actually jumps up an octave. So from C to the next C above, to the next number 1, if you like. And from there, we just really want to think about the shape of how this moves around the key, and, you know, think about how far one note leaps to the next, and use some markers for which note of the scale we land on sometimes to help us. Okay, so after those two, we come down to next door in the scale, so we can say moving down a second. And then we come down a third, 1, 2, 3. So somewhere over. And at this point, we're on the 5th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're in the 5th degree of the key that we're in, of the scale that we're using. And from there, we just climb up through the scale in seconds. So moving next door upwards. So do that again. Somewhere over the rainbow. Like that. I find sometimes the lyrics can help us position where we are. And then the next bit, the way up high, we're going to jump back down to the first note of the scale, the tonic. way. And here we're going to jump up to the 6th note of the scale. And we started on number 1, so that's also jumping up a 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so way, up, high. And for high, we just came down next door. So think about the shape of how this moves around. Up a big leap, a 6th, and then just moves next door. Importantly, it moves next door inside the scale to whatever note is next to it inside the scale. In this case, all the notes are white. So this is kind of the first half of the melody we're doing. You may just want to practice this and take this around the other keys first. But here's the next bit now. Imagine where we started on the first note of the scale. The next bit starts below that on the 6th note of the scale, on the octave below. So if we're on 1 here, that's number 7 of the scale, and that's number 6. So we're going to go from 6, and then we're going to leap up to the 4th note of the scale. So the distance between those two is a 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But this is the 4th note of the scale because the scale starts here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So from the 6th note under here up to the 4th note of the scale, and then follow the pattern. Okay, so we were on the F, we came down, and then we jumped down back to the 1st note of the scale, climbed up, and then we landed on the 2nd note of the scale. And then we're going to jump down to the 7th, climb up, and we finish back on the 1st note of the scale, which sounds like home, sounds complete. Now we're going to play that same melody in the key of G major. So first of all, we just need to remind ourselves of the G major scale. It's basically all white notes starting from G, except the 7th note of the scale. So remember, it's the 7th note of the scale back to G. So we've got an F sharp right at the top there leading back to home, okay? That's the 7th note. Now we know that scale shape, we've got to lock inside that shape and copy the same pattern, and we can use a few of those numbers. So we started off playing on the 1st note of the scale and then jumping up an octave, okay? So that should be fairly straightforward. G to G now instead of C to C. And the notes are the same distance, which is why we can create the same sound. And then what we did, we came down next door. So here immediately, we have to remember to use the F sharp because we're locking inside the G major scale. Easy mistake would be to use F, but that sounds different because that note isn't in this major scale. It makes it sound different. And then we did a leap. So we skipped the E, went down we need to go down a 3rd, okay? So now we're on the 5th note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then from there we climb back up. So remember when we climb back up to stick inside the key using the F sharp. Let's do that again. Like that. And then the next part, back down to the 1st note of the scale. And then if you remember, we jump up to the 6th note of the scale. So it's just feeling the same pattern inside here. Okay, so way, up, and then we came down next door for high. Okay, way, up to the 6th note of the scale, and then down to the 5th. I'll play that bit again. Then the second half of the melody, if you remember, it's a good time to remember a marker note for like a new kind of part of the melody, I guess, would be the 6th note of the scale just underneath where we started. So we started on this G, so down 7, down to 6, so that's E. And then from there, we leapt up to the 4th note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in real terms, when you're actually playing this, you're not consciously processing all these numbers, you're just kind of seeing, you get used to just kind of seeing where in the scale this happens. But it's helpful for me to just point out the odd marker for you. So 6 up to the 4th note of the scale, which would be C, right? C is the 4th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's A, and then the pattern from here. So I'm just moving in the same way throughout this scale, down to the 2nd note, and then here, remember, down to the 7th note is an F sharp. There's the 1st note of the scale, so down below that is the F sharp. Climbs up from there, and then finishes on the 1st note of the scale again on the tonic. Sound like home now in the key of G. I'll play that little bit again. Just quickly, if this video has been useful so far, then please click the like button because that really does help out the channel. And just to let you know, I do have some PDFs available from my website, all 12 major scales and all the minor scales as well, and those are complete with clear graphics, finger numbers, notation, and all the note names. Something handy to have with your practice, and I'll put a link for those down below. Okay, so in this video, I'm also going to do the key of D major, but over on my Patreon page, I'm going to do a few more keys with this example, and I'm actually going to be starting a series throughout this year, and probably next year as well, where I'm going to be doing lots more transposition examples and exercises, different melodies, different patterns, transposing from chord to chord, not just key to key, transposing whole chord progressions, and lots of fun things like that are really kind of helpful for your musicianship. Okay, so D major then. Let's get familiar with the D major scale. You may want to go up and down it to warm up. So now we're going to play the exact same pattern inside that scale, locking inside this scale shape. And we have 2 black notes to watch out for now. So there's a black note on the 7th note of the scale still. So that kind of bit of the shape will feel the same. But then there's also a black note on the 3rd note. 1, 2, 3. So if any of the melody uses the 3rd note of the scale, we've got to remember to play F sharp instead of F. So C sharp instead of C, and F sharp instead of F. As always, the melody starts on the 1st note of the scale and jumps up an octave. So in this case, it's D to D because we're in D major. If you remember, it comes down next door and then does a leap inside the scale. Climbs back up. I'll do that bit again. And then back down to the 1st note of the scale for way up high, way. Then it jumps up to the 6th note of the scale. Now the 6th note of the scale is B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it just comes next door for high, way up, high. And then the next part, remember, started on the 6th note of the scale, but below the 1st note we played. So there's D, the 1st note we played. We go down, 7, 6. So from there, we jump up to the 4th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we jump to the 4th note of the scale, but we can say we jumped up a 6th, because from here to here is a 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes through the scale, okay? So there's A, then it comes down next door in the scale. But remember, next door in the scale, from 4 down to number 3, we've got that F sharp to watch out for, which is the 3rd note of the scale. We're locking inside the scale. And it climbs up from the root after that, down to the 2nd note of the scale, then down to the 7th, climbs back up, and then finishes on the 1st note of the scale. I'll do that all together one more time without talking. hope that was helpful. Remember, you can try that in different keys with other melodies too. It's easier to start with melodies that only use notes in the scale to start with. You can try this with chords and chord progressions as well. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you are, make sure to click the notification bell so you get notified when a new video goes up. Next, you can watch one of these videos, which are also going to help you learn and memorize your major scales. Thanks for watching.